everybody. Cheers. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to this week's episode of Trades Lady Happy Hour Live, where every week I introduce you to another amazing woman in the trades. The purpose of these, for those of you who are new here, is to shine a light on all of the amazing women in the automotive and adjacent industries, whether it's mechanical, welding, fabrication, painters, you name it, all the trades ladies who work in and around the automotive industry. Women make up less than 2% of automotive trades folks. And so there's not a lot of us, but there are a ton of us. And it's important for their stories to be shared and for people to know about them and hear about them and meet them and see how absolutely kick-ass and awesome they are and hear their stories. So this week, I'm very excited to be joined by Bimmer B, is her Instagram handle. I believe it's pronounced Anna, but it may be Anna. I'm not positive. She will correct me if I'm wrong. She is a BMW master technician. So of course, you know that I'm like all about that life and really excited to meet a fellow BMW master tech. She also went to UTI just like I did. So I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to talk about. She also does enduro racing. She has her own project car that she just completed, or I think is close to completion, although they're never completed, are they? I'm really, really excited to get to meet her. I've been following her on Instagram for a long time now and following her journey and all of the badass stuff that she does. But I'm excited to hear more about her and share all of that with you guys as well. So I'm going to check in and see if she is in the room yet. I do see her, so I'm going to say she'll be joining us shortly.
Hi.
There she is. Hello.
How are you?
I am fantastic. The phone is cutting off half of my head. So I'm going to fix that. It's cutting off half of your head too.
Okay.
How
We'll
are
see
you?
It's great. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm really excited to meet you.
Yeah, well, actually, we met a long time ago for a very brief time,
Okay.
but it was like probably 12 years ago, maybe.
Oh, geez.
When I was going to UTI,
Oh.
everyone told me about you because BMW and UTI, like, oh, you should go meet Bogey, and she has a shop in Phoenix. So,
Oh, did you come by the shop?
yeah, I went over to 180 to see you.
Oh my gosh.
And then you were really busy, so we briefly talked, but I was
Yes.
like, oh, this is so cool. It's so awesome that you have your own shop. So
I actually remember that. I just didn't put two and two together to realize that was you. That's awesome.
Yeah, and actually my foreman, who I've been working with for probably 6 years, Jason Brown, went to step with you. So he knows you too. And he said, say hi.
Oh my gosh, Jason Brown, blast from the past. That's amazing. Yeah. How cool. Small world.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't remember and put two and two together. I've slept a few times since then.
Yeah.
So since UTI, you've been like seriously kicking ass.
Yeah, so when I was in Phoenix, right when I was about to start step there, it was 2008. So they're like, oh, we're shutting this down now. So then I had to go to Orlando to go to step. And then I moved from Orlando up to Virginia to get a job here. I interviewed a few places because I had family here. And I was like, you know what? I like this dealership. So
where are you from originally?
Colorado.
Oh, okay. So came to Phoenix for UTI, went to Orlando for step, and then landed in where? Virginia. Okay. And you've been there ever since?
Yeah, I think I'd planned to go back to Colorado, and then you kind of just invest a lot of time, and then time goes on, and then you just end up staying somewhere.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I plan on going back to Brooklyn, and here I am still in Phoenix, so there you go. I want to go into all of the things that you do, but I want to go back in time a little bit and have you share your story of how you got into the trades and where did that love get started for you?
It kind of was unexpected. I was from a very small town outside of Aspen, Colorado. We didn't have car scene. We didn't really do car stuff. Wasn't a lot going on there. So actually my first car was a Honda Prelude in like 1988. I loved it. And then there was this crusty E36 BMW that I had seen for sale for like every time I drove to school. I was like, oh, I love that. It was so gross, but I was like, it's so cool. So
I love
then,
that. I loved it. It was so gross.
yeah, it had really bad tin. It was like white and all the plastic parts had faded.
Of
It was
course.
typical E36.
Yeah.
And so then I ended up getting that. But while I was in school, I was like, I kind of want to understand how my car works, do an oil change, things like that. Because I've always like learning about things. I used to like take stuff apart, figure out how it works. And then when I used to dirt bike with my dad, he was friends with the KTM dealership down the street, and they were kind enough to let me work there during the summer.
Oh, nice.
And so I was doing like the counter stuff, and I had ridden dirt bikes, but then they were let me back in the shop, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to learn how to do this, or watch?" And I was like, "Okay, sure. I have no idea what you're doing, but I will stand here and watch you do it." And then they kind of let me slowly do things, like small tasks, and then I was helping them rebuild shocks and all the kind of stuff like that, supervised, of course. And then when I found out there was a automotive class that I could take as an elective, I was like, you know what, I will do that because that sounds really interesting. Just to
That's
take my car there, and I learned a lot. I had a good teacher. He was really helpful and like motivating. And he taught me a lot. And I was like, this is really neat. And then a UTI guy came and was like, hey, you can do this for a living. I was like, wow, that sounds great. I don't know
so
anything about it.
a UTI guy came to your high school auto shop?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. I
Yeah.
wish
So they
they'd
had a
done that.
recruitment program, and they kind of came and explained what it was. And then he made another visit to my house. And all this time, my dad, how I got into BMWs was my dad had his little 2002 TII that he had been restoring forever. I think he drove it around for maybe 2 years, and then the rest of the time it just spent in the garage. And he was doing his version of a full restoration, and how that goes.
Yes.
And I was, like a teenager, so I wasn't really into it. I was like, I don't really want to. I want to go hang out with my friends.
Right.
But so then when the UTI guy came, and he's like, oh, we have a BMW program also that you can transfer into after you finished everything. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. So then that was my goal. I was like, I'll go to UTI. And granted, I should have worked in a shop first to like understand the environment that I was going to go into, but I just like blindly went into it. I mean, I love it, and I loved UTI. I had a good time, but definitely going from learning about stuff in that kind of environment to an actual shop environment is
Right.
very different.
It
And yeah,
certainly is.
so, but I did love UTI. I did Ford Fact. I think there was another girl you had on there
Yeah.
that had done all of the classes, and like how great. I did diesel. I did
Oh, wow.
transport refrigeration,
Oh,
like
you did
everything.
all of them.
Yeah, everything. I wanted to do all of the things, so I did that. And then Ford Fact, like she was explaining, was super helpful with electrical, just
Yes.
very
Ford Fact is
immersive.
amazing.
Yeah. So
I don't like Fords, but I love Ford Fact.
exactly. I was like, I would never want to work on these, but I love everything that you're teaching me about them.
Yes, their training was phenomenal. And I totally relate with the whole like I should have worked at a shop first. Because I did you feel like this too at UTI? It was like I felt like all of my classmates had already been in the industry in some
Yeah.
form or another, and I was like, I don't know anything.
Yeah, because a lot of them are, coming out of the military. There were a lot of military people, because it's paid for. So they're like, oh, I'm just going to go do this now that I've gotten out of military, and that's awesome. And then, people that are doing, extended learning. But the problem was nobody wants to hire, well, at that time, I'm sure it's better now, but nobody wants to hire a woman because they're like, you don't know anything. So then you have to go through all the schooling and be like, I do know this because I went to the school,
Right.
even though it's the same thing that I kind of knew already. But, it's
Yeah.
just easier to get in the door with paperwork
Yeah.
thing, regardless of what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that was my experience. I don't know how yours was when you went
It
there.
was the same. And I honestly, like, I hear improvements to that, but I still feel like it is the same in a lot of ways, unless you happen to land in a really awesome shop or an awesome environment. Like, nobody wants to hire you if you're young, nobody wants to hire you if you're inexperienced,
Yeah.
and nobody wants to hire you if you're a woman. So if you're young, female, and inexperienced, like, you got
Yeah.
three strikes, and it was really challenging.
Yeah, so how did you just decided to branch out? Because I remember asking, I think vaguely, you just had gotten tired of the dealership life and you're like, I'm gonna go out on my own. So you just
Yeah.
decided one day that you wanted to have your own thing so you don't have to deal with it. And then you
Yeah,
went that
kind
way.
of. Yeah. So I had probably a similar experience to you. I felt like I needed to go to school, needed to go to BMW, needed to have all the certifications so that people could take me seriously.
Yeah.
And then even then people didn't take me seriously.
Yeah.
And then I worked for 7 years, like at the dealership, getting good at what I did. And I
Yeah.
realized that like, I missed the challenge of working on other cars besides BMWs, and I
Hmm.
missed interacting with people, like the customers and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So that's when I decided to go off on my own and start the shop. But
It is very disconnected in terms of like if being in the shop and
yeah,
the out front experience. Because I think it's important, A, from a customer standpoint, for them to understand what's going on with their car. And then if it gets relayed through multiple people, it kind of gets lost. And then
yeah,
it's more of like a robotic, like, these are the things you need and you should do them. And they're like, but why? And you're like, because.
yeah.
So,
And then there's like the classic, like, no, nobody invited past this door to go into the shop. And I'm
yeah,
like, no, we need to get rid of that. Like, people need to come out and see what's going on with their car and understand it. And like, yeah, we need to translate it into English for them.
yeah,
And some technicians are not really good at that.
yeah. Well,
But
now, so we have to do a video for every car
which I
and we
love.
shoot a video. And I think well, some people hate it for some reason. I don't really know why.
The
They're like, don't send
technicians or
me
the
anything.
customers?
No, the customers. They
Really?
don't want to know what's wrong with their car, strangely.
Yeah.
So they get mad when we send a video. But as far as a teaching tool and like explanation, I think it's
Yeah.
very helpful to have
It's
that, which is where technology has taken us. But then it's also making our cars more complicated. So it's,
how I'm curious how that's being received at the dealership, because I know they're starting to do that at a lot of the independent shops too. And I think some of the technicians are super on board with it, and other technicians are like, "That's just BS. You're making me do more work." La 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 la. How is it being
yeah.
received there?
At the beginning, even I was resistant. I was like, I don't want to do this. This is just
Right.
taking of time, and then you have to have like your phone and do all these things. And then they were making, an incentive because they're like, listen, all these other dealerships are doing it. This is where we're going to go. So you can either do it now or do it later, and we're going to force you.
Right. Get on board
So,
or get off. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much they did have an ultimatum. They're like, listen, if you don't do this, then you're not part of our dealership anymore.
Oh wow.
So it kind of came down to that because, it comes down from BMW, it goes down to management, and then all of that. But after a while, I just enjoyed doing it because then you can explain stuff. And really, if you don't trust the service writer to sell your work, then that's a tool that you can use and you're basically selling your own work. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
be good at conveying stuff. If you're not good at explaining things, then it's kind of difficult. But it's also helpful because you have to explain it, because you can look at stuff all day long and you're like this, and this. But if you have to explain it to somebody that doesn't know what they're looking at, then
Yeah.
it's better for you, I think.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think that once the customers see it, they believe it. Like, you can explain it all day long. You
Yeah,
tell someone their lower ball joint is bad and they're like, huh? But you show them the
yeah,
looseness in the wheel and they're like, oh, okay, got it. Right. Like,
yeah.
that makes sense.
I like interacting with customers. I just think it's an important part of it, but it gets lost because a lot of people think that it takes away time or, they just don't want to do it or deal with it. I mean, granted, no one wants to sit in a car with an angry customer, but,
That takes way
so,
more time.
yeah. I had actually had one today where I had to sit in a car with this guy for an hour because there was the ever since scenario. Like, ever since you set my clock, this doesn't work anymore and it's
Right.
your fault.
Right.
But then we all turned it into a learning experience and we learned why. And then now he knows more about his car. So
I
he
love
was
that.
actually grateful.
I love that. And I love the way you said that. Like, it turns into a learning experience. I feel like so much of the time as technicians, particularly, like, I hear mechanics complain, technicians complain all the time. They're like, these stupid customers, they don't know. And I'm like, you're right, they don't. That's why you have a
Yeah.
job. Right.
Yeah.
And if every time somebody says something stupid, like, ever since you fixed my brake lights, now my windows don't work, and you're like, okay. So we could be irritated that they don't know, or we can
Yeah.
say, awesome learning opportunity. Let's talk about how cars work.
Yeah.
And it changes their perspective of how people see us.
Yeah. There's definitely the misconception about, people have had a bad experience somewhere else and then they put that on to wherever they go from then on.
Right.
And then if you happen to be on the receiving end of that,
Right.
it's not great. But then you can, use that to say, hey, this isn't what we're about, and
Yeah.
this is what we do, and this is how we're going to do it better for you. And they can either accept that or, go somewhere else again. I mean, some
Right.
people just choose to have bad experiences, and you
Right.
can't do anything about those customers.
It's like dating, right? People bring their like stuff into their next relationship, right? It's like the same thing.
Yes, that's a good analogy.
They bring their past experiences into the relationship with their new mechanic, and yeah.
Yes, and you have to deal with
So
it.
I want to go back a little bit because you said a couple of things about where you were starting to get some hands-on experience, the shop you worked at in the summers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so interesting. You were working in the office and they, so counter to everything that we hear and what we've just been talking about, people not wanting to give us opportunities. And like, here was
Mm-hmm.
this shop who was like, yeah, you want to come back and look at this and check this out and get hands-on with it. How cool is that they were
Yeah,
inviting like that?
that's what, we meet a lot of different people in this industry, and there's some people that are very uplifting and some people that aren't. And the people that are uplifting, like it takes, just a couple people where they're like, hey, you should try this and you're good at it, or, whatever, someone that's encouraging. And so for them, I always remember them because they were so nice. And I'm sure I was doing everything completely wrong and I had no idea what I was doing. And they're like, hey, did you read the instructions? And I'm like, no, I'm just taking this apart. But they were so nice and patient. And that's what a good teacher is, no matter what you're doing. And so for those to have those people, especially for women that don't feel comfortable in those scenarios or like want to learn more things but are afraid of looking stupid. So to have those kind of people that like support you at the beginning is really important,
Yeah.
because we're like, when you're talking about, I'm considering doing this for a career,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, great. Like, you were really helpful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I hope you do it because it would be good for you.
Were you already considering taking shop class when that experience happened, or do you feel like that kind of started you on that path?
That was kind of in between because it went from the summer into my senior year when I started taking the auto class. So everything kind of came together. And then I was also taking a physics class. And so my dad was a woodworker and my mom's an artist.
Oh, nice.
So like I like creative stuff and the design side of things also. And I think that working with your hands in this way is also, I would consider it a creative outlet because you're problem solving. And I think there's a lot of crossover between all of those things.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
when I was doing the shop class, working on my own car, and then I had those outside mentors, I think that made me more willing to like actually go to the school. Because before I was like, I don't know what I want to go. I don't want to go to college because I don't know what I'm going to study. I was in one of those scenarios where I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know. So then when that happened, I was like, oh, all of this makes a lot of sense and I actually enjoy doing this. So maybe I should pursue this.
I love it. And I love that you found supportive people along the way and that it sounds like your parents were super supportive of it as well.
I think they had different expectations initially because when they signed me up for, I played classical piano for 12 years.
Oh,
So I
wow.
think for a little bit, they thought I was going to go into music or, something like that. And then I was like, nope, I'm going to ruin my hands and be a mechanic. I never played.
I love that. I thought I wanted to be a ballerina when I was a kid. So like you could have been playing piano and I could have been dancing like
Yeah,
and
we
here
can
we
still do
are.
it. We can still do it.
One day, when
Yeah,
we're old and retired from working on cars,
yeah.
it'll be
We'll
our
be like
second career.
crippled, but we'll try to do it anyways.
I love it. It'll be fantastic. No, you're absolutely right. It is very much a crossover. I didn't really think about it in that sense until I got into building cars. But
Mm-hmm.
there is an art about it, and you're absolutely right. Like even the diagnostic process and just figuring things out. And I think anytime you're using your hands and your brain simultaneously, like doing that
Yeah,
kind of making something with your hands it's art. It's art, whether
yeah.
it's a car or wood or whatever. I think that's
Well,
very
and you're
true.
using, because you have to like look at something, not just look at it, but understand how it operates. And then in your mind, take how it operates and then come up with a solution to whatever problem there may be. So you're putting it all together and you're visualizing that. And then you come up with a solution. And I think that's the most satisfying part about what we do is, problem solving.
Yeah.
Because it's satisfying, even if you have a terrible issue, like a broken bolt, whatever. At the end, when you finally fix it, you're like, wow, that was so awesome. And I learned this, and now I can apply that to the next job or, whatever. Yeah. And I think that's the fun and challenging, but I think those two go together in a positive way.
Yeah. I feel like that was one of the reasons why I ultimately left the dealership, because the way flat rate system is set up, I felt like it took the things that I loved the most were the most challenging problems, and you don't get paid to fix those. I mean, you do get paid, but like not the amount of time and energy that you have vested in them. So like, I loved rolling up my sleeves and being like, I have no idea what's wrong with this, but I'm going to figure it out, damn it. But then you don't get paid for that. So I think that was a big reason why I left. I was like, I want to do all the hard problems. I want to deal with things that I can't diagnose on my way to the car before I've even sat in it. You know what I mean? Because you see the same thing over and over again at the dealership.
Yeah. But you're like, oh, it's a check engine light on, a G01. It's probably radiator blinds or a thermostat. Right. And then you're like, oh, there it is.
What did you just say? Radiator blinds?
Yeah.
I've been out of the dealership for far too long.
So do you remember on E46s where they had remember the fans used to have the little blinds on them?
The little like flapper thingies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To help the engine warm up. So now they made an even more complicated version of that fails all the time, of course, because everything's over-engineered. So like the more technologically advanced we are, like the less efficient we become somehow. It's like this weird backwards thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have these big blinds that are like a huge assembly, and then they have actuator motors, and then the actuators fail, or like, they're sitting in the front of the car, so a rock gets stuck and it sees that it's binding, so then it sets a fault, and then it's an emissions light, and then it's just like,
Oh my God. It's amazing how quickly technology will pass you by. Like, I've been out of the dealership now for, God, I think 14 or 15 years, which is crazy. Like the E90 was like just coming out. Like, so all of the new stuff, like when we started getting it at my shop, I was like, whoa, I'm out of touch. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah. Even the training isn't really that applicable to real world stuff. Even if you go to, Jersey to learn, they're just like, here's how this works. And you're like, okay, great, but it's never going to fail that way in real life. Or, it's you have to do all these extra things, or the way it's designed is just not good. I mean, for serviceability, I mean, you're talking about the whole industry is based on efficiency, and then the way that you're designing it is the least efficient way. So you're like, what are you doing?
Well, and it's this interesting, like the conundrum, like you're absolutely right. And I find myself arguing with people over this a lot. And like, I'm not really sure which side I stand on it, but people say new cars are so much worse than old cars. Like, they're not worse. They're just more complicated. Yeah. And it's this weird thing where it's like, they get more complicated so that the cars can be more efficient. Not necessarily that working on them can be more efficient.
Yes, exactly. That's why my ideal job that I was thinking I would want to do that I don't think exists is to be a liaison between the technician and the engineer to increase, efficiency. Like, oh, if you just fastened this a different way, or you flip this around, it wouldn't take me 5 hours to take this bumper off. I could do it in 20 minutes. And that's not a thing that would affect, anything big or the design of the car or anything like that.
But it affects the company's bottom line. And you know what? That position does exist. I did not know that such a position existed, but I had a couple of Nissan, and I think it was Nissan. Nissan engineers who were going on a tour around shops and talking to technicians and finding out from them what their biggest challenges were and what they could improve on with their cars. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. I don't know if the other manufacturers do it, but it was such a cool thing because we were able to say, like, simple stuff like where you put your oil filter is stupid, because there's
Hmm.
no way to do it without getting oil everywhere, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like
That's
simple
well, the new
things.
engines that they just came out with, the oil filters on the back, and
Yeah.
it faces the firewall at an angle. So you're like, and they use three different style oil caps now, so you have to use a different socket for each engine.
On
And you're like,
BMW?
why?
Oh no.
Yeah. So that's just, it's so unnecessary
It
for,
is.
I know. I'm sure there's some engineering reason that they do it, but
I'm
you
not
know,
sure. I'm not sure there is. I think everything, and it's not just with cars, it's with everything in life. Like
yeah.
every department is so compartmentalized that they only see what they see. And they're like, this is the best way to build this piece, not necessarily seeing how it integrates into the rest of the whole. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I have to take the entire car apart to get at that thing. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So how did you end up going from your shop into like all of the things that you do now? Because I've been meaning
I
to ask
have
you.
I have no idea. I love how masterfully you're turning this into interviewing me. I love this.
Well, it's my opportunity to talk to you and ask you questions, so I'm going to
I
take
know, no,
advantage of
this is
it.
great. I absolutely love it. I'm having a blast talking to you. Um, I started the shop. I was doing that for a couple of years, and then honestly, it was pre-social media days.
Hmm.
And there had been a couple of articles written about me as a female tech, as a female shop owner. And so when the producers of All Girls Garage were looking for a female technician, they found me through the news articles. Like social media hadn't really like blossomed into what it is today. Like now you can get online and find tons of female
Yeah.
mechanics, and there were tons then too, but like nobody knew about them. So
Hmm.
I kind of got lucky. I didn't plan on doing TV. I just kind of fell into it, and now here I am, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
It's kind of crazy, but it's good. It's fun stuff. So I want to talk about some of the other stuff you do
Okay.
because you have a BMW 2002, and
Hmm.
I love BMW 2002s,
Yes, it's
and
so cute. I love it. Well, I don't love it. It's very frustrating, but I do love
of
it.
course, and that's why we love it slash hate it, and yeah. So tell me the story about this 2002 because you just completed it, didn't you? Or at least
I
got it
wouldn't
to a
say
car show for the first.
completed.
They're never
Yeah,
complete. They're
yeah.
never complete.
So that was the one that my dad was building the whole time I was growing up. He used to take me to school in it, and then he was restoring it in his garage. And he stripped it, he rebuilt everything, he stripped it, the body down and painted it himself, which looked good. But then later on, we find out that it was not so good. uh,
Hey, for a first attempt, right? You know.
yeah. So then I go to school and then it's a couple years and then he passed away in 2013. So I went out there to get it and I was like, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to finish it. And finish it was, it just needed the doors, the trunk, and the hood painted. So I was like, great, we'll
Or
just
so
throw
you
these
thought.
on and we'll bring it out here and I'm just going to finish it in like 3 weeks. It's going to be great. And we're like boxes of stuff. And then we get it here and we took it to the body shop and he's like, I don't know if I can match the paint. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then he's like, oh, the primer is lifting. And I was like, no. And then they tried to block the doors and they were all wavy.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I'll just buy new doors from BMW, which they had in stock. They had like brand new glass for this
What?
and brand new doors. So I was able to get all of that stuff. So then
Who
they tried to put the
knew?
doors on and the gaps are all wrong because I have pictures from I guess the original owner in 1982. They ripped the whole thing apart because it was in Chicago and it was like completely rusted out. So they
Oh.
cut like the rocker panels off. They cut like the front fenders, like the
Oh my God. So you
strut
had a whole
guards.
can of worms that you didn't even realize.
Yeah, so
That
we're like, can we just make it fit? And they're like, And then it got moved around to a couple of different places because I didn't have anywhere to store it and it wasn't complete. So I didn't, I can't put it outside.
right.
And then it sat for a long time. And then I was like, I'm going to spend all my money on race cars now and just not do anything with that for a little bit. So then I started racing cars and got distracted with that. And then finally, in like, I think it was 2018, I found somebody that could paint it at a reasonable cost because, we're like, oh, it's a project car. One guy quoted me $50,000 to paint it. And I was like,
I don't
no.
have that kind of money.
Yes. I was like, take pity on me. So they're like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And then I think they had never done something like that before, and then I think they immediately regretted it as soon as they started taking it apart. Because I didn't take it apart; it was half taken apart by my dad,
Right.
and then we had kind of taken it more apart, and then it moved a bunch of times. So then I
It's like the
basically
worst
took it.
possible
I
scenario.
know. I took it to this poor shop. I took it to them, and I was like, "Here you go." And then I had like these boxes of parts, and I was like, "I don't know what these go to because I don't know anything about the car." And that's what's been the most frustrating thing is, on cars I work on, I could find a bolt in the middle of the shop and be like, "Oh, this goes to the sunroof cassette." And then this, I'm like, I don't know what this weird shape thing is.
Yeah.
I don't know where it goes. They were asking me for parts. I didn't know what they looked like. I couldn't find them. They're not available anymore. So I had to go on like
ultimate
forums.
Puzzle.
Yeah. And, there's like the vintage car hoarder people that have all these parts that you have to ask.
Yeah.
You're like, what is this? How does it work? And do you have any? And they're like, yes, I have it in my barn full of things out in the back.
I don't know where it is, but it's there somewhere. Yeah. Thank God like 2002 has like a cult following to it.
Yeah. All of those people that I met on the forum like saved that project because I was so just overwhelmed and frustrated and I didn't know where anything was. And then I was buying stuff that I then found later because I just didn't know what it was. And so I got it painted and then I got into biking and all these like other hobbies to kind of avoid this.
You just kept getting distracted. You're like, oh, this is annoying. What else can I do?
Pretty much, yeah. And then, so just the kind of the end of last year, I started working on it again because it's just daunting, especially when you take something apart a year ago.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I'll remember how that goes back together. And then it's in pieces, like the window regulator and all the window track stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how this goes together. So then I finally just one night I was like, all right, I'm going to figure it out and put it all together and just in my cold little garage with my one light and put my window glass in. And then, once you start getting somewhere, then you're like, okay, it's not that bad. I was just frustrated and I couldn't do it. So I started working on it more, got all the trim on, got the glass in. It runs fine. Like it just starts right up and
That's
it burns
awesome.
a little bit of oil, but that's okay.
That's all right.
So then I took it to the car show and then the brakes were locking up because they were so like crusty. They had sat. The last time it was driven and registered was 2002.
Wow.
So it's been sitting since that long and it's been driven, out of the garage and back. So it's since I started working on it, it's been driven 45 miles.
Oh my gosh.
So
so things are
pretty new.
Yeah.
And I just put the new calipers on. Everything's good, and I just need to get the like the interior, but that's not really a big deal. That's not preventing me from driving it.
Right.
So
it looks fantastic, by the way.
You.
For anybody who's watching, like go check out. She's got a little like highlight reel of this car, and there's just so many cool pictures of this whole process, and it looks fantastic. I'm super jelly because I love 2002s.
It is so fun to drive and it's so small, and every time I get in it, it's like really cute. But I'm always afraid something's gonna happen. I'm like listening for noises or afraid. I'm like, what is that? Is something falling apart? I don't know.
Well, we can't turn that off anyway. I get into people's cars and I'm like, what's that squeak? What's that noise? I'm like touching things to make the rattle go away. I'm like, I can't turn it off. It's just
it's just there. It's ingrained into us.
Forever. It really is. So I got to ask you, because you've been living the dealership life pretty much out of school, right?
Yeah.
So and it sounds like it may have been similar for what you've experienced with this 2002. Like I know when that's what I knew. That's the world I knew. And then when I got out of working on BMWs and I would work on anything else, I immediately was like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And it was like being kind of just faced with this reality, like the things that I don't know, things that I don't really understand, which I do now, right? But it took a while to get there. And it was intimidating. It was like, I questioned myself. Did you ever have a point with it where you're like, maybe I'm not so good, maybe I don't know? Like, did you question yourself, or was it just like, I don't know this thing?
I think at the beginning it's really hard because I moved to a new place. I didn't know anybody. and I had never worked in a dealer before, so I was like, I don't know what's happening here. And then, understanding how flat rate works, understanding how you're actually going to turn hours, because that's the major thing is
Yeah.
how many hours can you turn? And they're like, oh, you don't know anything, and you're just kind of fumbling along, like trying to understand how all of these things work, and
Right.
then understand the processes. It was really intimidating, yeah, because and being the only girl in the shop is you're like living on in my experience is like living under a microscope because everyone's like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, do you know what you're doing? And then you start doubting and you're like, do I know what I'm doing? I don't think I know what I'm doing. So then it just takes a while because nothing's really, it's hard the first time
Yeah.
and then you learn, but there's just the job is the same every time. You just
Right.
get better at doing it.
Yeah.
And
I,
then when you understand that, then you're like, okay, so
yeah.
I just need to do it more, regardless of how frustrating it is at this moment.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. And it was interesting, like for myself, I felt like I came along in that process, started feeling like, okay, like I can tackle stuff. I know my shit and I could work on BMWs day in and day out and felt like even if I hadn't encountered this problem before, I knew I could figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first time I worked on something that wasn't a BMW, I was like, uh
Yes. I think about
it
that
made
because
me question myself all over again.
I don't really work on cars outside of work anymore. Not that I did before. I was working on my race cars and I kind of was like messing with Miatas when I raced Miatas for a little bit. And even that, I'm like, oh, we have sealed engines and, all this other stuff. I don't really know.
Right.
But yeah, I think about it because you are living in like a little microcosm and
Yeah.
you're like BMW everything. And then anytime someone's like, oh, hey, can you do side work on my, Toyota? You're like, I don't
Right.
really want to because I don't really know what I'm doing. But yeah, everything's basically the same. It's just,
Right.
I think we're used to working on flat rate where you're like, oh, I want to understand it immediately so I can get it done quickly.
Yeah.
And you forget the learning curve part of that.
Right. Yeah. Did working on the 2002 do that to you as well? Like, oh, I don't know this stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm supposed to be a BMW Master Tech. Like, I don't know how any of this goes together. And then, you have your paper manual you're trying to look through,
Right.
and like with the wiring diagram that it just has a bunch of stuff. And it's, yeah, because I have a lighting issue right now that I don't have the correct diagram for, and I don't have the key for it. So everything's numbered in it, but I don't know what it is.
Oh,
So I can't find all these junction points because I don't
right.
know what they are. So
Right.
I'm like, oh, how? And then I think we overcomplicate stuff so much that when you work on something really simple, it tends to stump you because it's so simple and you're like overthinking it. And that's
Yes.
a problem that I have sometimes with things.
I think it's the nature of working on newer cars versus older cars. Like I've learned this over the years because I did the same thing. Like maybe this is a problem I have to get, like this is me. I need to learn better. I need to whatever. But I think it's inherent with when you're used to working on super complicated vehicles and then you work on something that is not complicated at all. Like our brains are already going to like, there's got to be a module somewhere that controls
Yeah.
this. And maybe it's
Yeah.
getting a faulty message from some other sensor. Like we
Yeah.
just go to complicated right off the bat.
Actually, that happened because I was like, oh, my tachometer doesn't work. That's so weird. It's probably like X, Y, and Z. And then someone on the forum was like, oh, there's a little black wire that sometimes comes off the back of the cluster. Did you check that? And I was
Right.
like,
Right.
no.
No.
I will now, though. Oh, it
No.
fixed it. Okay.
I was too busy
Yeah.
overthinking. No.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you like with this 2002, like you kind of avoided it. You found other hobbies. Like it was a little overwhelming. What like how did you get yourself back? Like how did you wrap your brain around like, okay, I'm just gonna do it? Like what was that point for you?
I think I just got tired of looking at it, where I'd like avoid my garage because I'm like, this is so annoying. And like, yeah, I want to drive it. I think what deterred me from working on it initially, though, was you just get kind of burned out when you're working on cars all the time. You don't want to go home and work on cars, especially when I was working, at the dealership and then I would go, when I was racing cars, work on my car, my race car, and then you had to get, prep it for races every weekend.
Yes.
It's just so tiring.
Nonstop.
And you're like, I just don't feel like working on cars. I want to go do something else for a little bit.
Yeah.
And, set that down. And then, once you start, like I said, you do one thing and then you're like, okay, it's not that daunting, so I can get it done. And then it just kind of, you understand more about it once you actually look at it. And then
it does help to look at things to understand.
Yeah.
This.
Once you finally are like, okay, I'm just overcomplicating this, and I know that I'm avoiding it deep down inside. So I just need to recognize that and just start doing something.
Yeah.
And then that's the biggest thing, is just start doing anything, and then you can move forward.
Yeah, there was a story that you had posted that was like starting with the simple stuff, and I it's so key, right? Like, just because I don't know about you, but I feel like I need to feel a sense of accomplishment, right? Like, the first thing I write on my to-do list is write to-do list, so that when I'm done, I can cross something off. You know,
exactly.
Like, I need that sense of accomplishment. So like starting with something simple, so you can be like, all right, I got this. I can do this. Like, little thing, but super important.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your racing. Can we?
With the car racing or the bike racing?
All of the above, because you're like a total badass and you do all of the things. So which came first, bike racing or car racing?
Car racing, because like, being around car people. I used to live by Summit Point.
Okay.
So we would go there, and it's a little track out in West Virginia. Some of our friends ran, a track day thing. And then I had a little E30. I was like, I'm going to do an engine swap on it.
You have all the cars I want. Damn
I
you.
know. I bought that E30 for $1,000 too. And it was running and driving, and it was awesome. Yeah. The interior was good. It was before everybody got into E30s, so I got like a super deal on it.
I have wanted an E30 for so long. Like, a side note, my very first BMW shop that I worked at was an independent shop, and they wouldn't let me work on the cars, but they like put me in running parts and stuff. But their parts running car was an E30 that had been like race decked out, and like stopped using it because they upgraded to another fancier, faster E30. I was so in love with that thing. I just loved cruising around, just like tearing up the roads, picking up parts.
They're so fun.
They're amazing.
Yeah, and they're fun to drive. So I did a engine swap. I put an E36 engine in there just for fun. And then I did the engine swap right before my dad died. And then after that, I was kind of in the space of where, I need a distraction because, this thing happened to me and I need something to take my mind off of it. So then I was like, oh, I'll just go to the track and do a track day and see how that is. And then I was like, okay, well, this is really fun. I never expected to go on the track. I used to get rides with people and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And I never thought about myself doing it for some reason.
Interesting.
Like, it never occurred to me that I could just go do that. So then I got it, did track day, and then I was like, all right, well, now I need a full cage and everything. So then I was the person that shows up at the track day with like a fire suit and like a caged car, and they're like, who is this person? Like, we've only seen her one time. What is she doing?
Oh my God, that would totally be me, Jesus.
Well, I mean, really, that's what I tell people is people get so excited about track days. We're like, you need safety equipment.
Yeah.
Like, it's dangerous. So like, oh, it's a track day. It's super fun. Yes. And for the most part, nothing happens. But if something does happen, you need to have, like, people don't think about upgrading their brakes, and they don't have harnesses, and they have like clapped out helmets and stuff. But that's not the cool stuff. That's why no one wants to do anything, because the cool stuff is like, oh, I rebuilt my engine and I put this exhaust on and did all these things. And you're like, okay, well, but that's not going to help you if something happens, even if someone else hits you. Like, for example, my accident that took me out of racing. So I raced my E30 for a little bit, but since I had done the engine swap and it kind of didn't really fit in the class, I was racing with SCCA.
Okay.
And then I got into, it's like, we have a regional class called Showroom Spec Miata, which is like Spec Miata, but a little bit lower power, and they're all sealed engines, so they're all exactly the same. So it's to keep people from like overspending on stuff, because when you do your crazy spec Miata builds and people spend like $20,000 on blueprinted parts and stuff like that, it's
Yeah.
really expensive. So we had like a cheap version, and I raced that. It was like 52 cars in our class.
Okay.
They're all the same, so it's really competitive.
That's
It's
really all
really
about the
fun.
drifting.
Yeah. And that was so fun. It's like driving a little go-kart, and I loved it. And then the week that I agreed to pay the body shop to paint my 2002,
Oh no.
I was like, I don't think I'm gonna race this year because I'm gonna put money into the car. And they're like, oh, just do one more race. Like, okay. So the fourth lap of the first race of the year, this person just comes into me on the straightaway because he tried to like block somebody and tap them, and then basically did a 90-degree into me, and then I hit the wall at like 90 miles an hour and flipped the car a whole bunch, and then totaled this rental car.
Oh wow.
And then I was like, all right, well, now I'm done for the season, so that's great. And then I just started. That's actually how I got into biking.
Okay.
So I still like being competitive. I was like, it's just too expensive to be building a project car and racing and like doing all that stuff.
Both of those are expensive in and of themselves.
Yeah.
So the accident, as horrific as it sounds, any major injuries? Were you okay?
Yeah, I was totally fine.
That's amazing.
I have the video of it, which is awesome. But yeah, I think while I was crashing, I was like, well, this sucks. And I didn't make any noise. There's nothing happening in the video. It was just in my mind. I was like, this is going to be expensive and it sucks. And now I won't be able to race the rest of the weekend. So,
that's an amazing reaction.
Yeah, I was pretty bummed. And yeah, luckily nothing happened. I hit my head on the bar because the roll cage sits really low in those because they're such small cars. So like when he came into me, I like hit my head on the side of the halo, and that was pretty much the worst thing that happened.
Yeah.
But I just like let go of the wheel because I've seen way too many videos of people break their wrists. If you're trying, like if you know you're not going to save the car, you can't fight it.
Right.
You just like let go. So that's when I ended up hitting the wall, and it was very exciting. And now I have a cool video. And then I was like, all right, well, now I'm going to go race bikes.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I love that too. Like the just let go, right? Like, cause isn't that applicable to like so much in life?
Yes. Actually, that's true. Yeah. Just, if you can't control it, just let go.
Just let go. I really appreciate you bringing up the safety piece though. Like, I feel like, especially nowadays, and maybe it was like this when I was younger too, and I just didn't notice it, and maybe I'm just getting old and curmudgeon-y. But you know, I feel like there's so many people who are really getting into like, I want to like build my car up to go super fast, and I'm going to do illegal drags, and I'm going to go race it on the track, and like they're going to do their own work even though they don't really know how to do it, which makes it even more dangerous. And like, and there isn't that piece of, yes, this is fun, yes, this is awesome, but you can also die. And like, you really...
Oh, there's RP Performance. That's who I was renting the car from. I love them.
Nice.
Hi, Brett.
I love it. You had a lot of people, if you've been seeing the comments, a lot of people showing their love for you. A lot of people have a
Thank you
ton of
guys. I
respect for
appreciate you watching.
All
of my race car friends.
I love it. I love it. You are loved and respected, clearly. So car racing. So now that's done. You've stopped doing that. Do you have any desire to go back to that, or are you more on the bicycle thing now?
I would love to race cars again. It's just expensive and time consuming. I mean, if I had, you know, anyone could say that if I had a disposable like an income, of course, I would love to go do all of those things. Sure. But, you know, if I didn't have the 2002 and if I wasn't racing bikes, because I wouldn't consider myself like super athletic, but then I got into bikes.
I know, like you're winning championships biking, like
haphazardly. I was like, oh, I'll just try a cyclocross race. And so that's like a course, and you do laps on the course, and it has kind of obstacle things, and you feel like you're going to die the whole time. And I was like, okay, this is fun. And then I kind of got into mountain biking. I love that.
You feel like you're going to die all the time. This is fun.
It's fun afterwards. It's actually fun.
Not
you're like, I'm going to die. And then afterwards you're like, okay, I'll probably do that again. So then my team was like, you should try mountain biking. I was like, okay. And then I get this mountain bike and immediately endo it. And then I was like, all right, well, now I'm gonna go do this 12-hour race, like the second week that I got this bike. And so it was a 12-hour, it's called the Baker's Dozen. It was a 12-hour mountain bike
Oh,
race.
wow.
And you just keep going with
I
laps.
love how full bore you go into things. You're like, I kind of
It,
like
sometimes
this.
it works and sometimes it's like not the best because then the burnout is definitely much faster with doing things that way, but it's
That's a
fun
fair point.
and I do enjoy it.
Were
So
you always that way? Like as a kid too, just like you went all in 100% with things?
I think so. Yeah, I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna do this now. I'm just basically my life motto is like I'll show up and see what happens. There's like not a lot of planning that goes into it. I'm just kind of gonna go there and see how things turn out.
Interesting.
And it makes it
I
exciting because then I think you don't have as, you know, it's hard when you have expectations. You're like, oh, it's going to go this way and this is going to happen. But when you just show up and do stuff, it's kind of like how my mechanic experience is. Like, I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do this now. I was like, oh, this is not how I expected it, but this is the way it is. So I guess I'm just going to deal with it.
I love it. It's a great attitude. And of course, like part of me wants to know like where did that come from? Like how can we get more parents to nurture that in their kids? Like do you feel like it was just something you were born with that kind of attitude of like I'm just going after whatever it is I set my mind to or
I think, encouragement definitely from my parents, like I had strict parents. I feel like they were kind of strict. They just had, expectations and I always felt like I needed to meet those. But, by pushing people not totally past their comfort zone, but, a little bit, I think it helps you toughen up and like want to do better, especially when you have people that are encouraging. You're like, I want to do better for this. And then you carry that with you for, I would hope, the rest of your life. But yeah, surrounding yourself with people that are encouraging and they're like, you can do this, not like lying to you if you can't do it, but like, in positive affirmation. So I think that helps with that, especially, and it started with that. And then, you go to the next thing and with like the KTM shop and those people that encourage me and all of that. And if you don't get exposed to that, then like you were talking about with, I think, Angie, you have that imposter syndrome, which I think is always there for, some people who are like,
yeah.
do I know what I'm doing? But other people see what you're doing and they're not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
And so they're having those people that can give you that constructive criticism and push you further, I think is beneficial to everybody.
Isn't it interesting how the people who say we can do it, we don't believe, and the people who say we
Yeah,
can't do it, we
I
do
know, it's
believe?
so frustrating. Like, why am I thinking this?
Why am I listening to those people? It sounds like you've had some really great experiences though with your shops, like finding
Yeah,
supportive people and
yeah, I think I've been lucky. I had not a lot of negative experiences. I mean, there's always going to be people that are negative, whether they mean it or not. And I think I used to get angry about when people would say, comments, because there are people that don't think I should be here just as a woman. And I'm not going to change anybody's mind. If you think that and you've already decided that, that's on you. But I think I had to, instead of get mad about it and take it as a personal attack, then it's easier to just know that it's out of a place of like, I guess kind of ignorance. Like if you haven't seen that and
yeah.
you don't know any women mechanics and it's so new to you, like sometimes you just say stuff and like people don't realize that it is
How
hurtful
horribly
or,
rude it is. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Like I'm like, okay, this person actually trying to be rude and demean you, or do they just not know?
Yeah.
And most of the time they're not trying to be that way. They just don't know.
Yeah.
So then you can either like show them what you can do and why you should be there, and whatever the case is, scenario it may be. But yeah, but to be honest, the rudest people have actually been women, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah, I mean with customers, a lot of them have been women that have just been rude to me.
Interesting.
But I think that also, a lot of people have if someone's explaining something to you and you don't understand it, it's easy for you to feel like attacked. Like if you feel like you're at a disadvantage of knowledge,
Right.
and that comes out in weird ways, I think, from some
Yeah.
people. So explaining something, and that goes back to when you're asking about how technicians explain things to people. You know, sometimes it can come off being rude when you're
Right.
trying to tell somebody something and they don't understand it. It can come off as you like, oh, I know more than you. But really, you're just trying to explain it.
Right.
And then, so you have to come to like a common ground
Yes.
between you and who you're trying to explain it to. And then
Yeah.
there's some people, like I said, that's just the way they are, and that is what it is. But that shouldn't affect you and how you do your job or how you see yourself.
Yeah.
Although it is kind of hard to not take that to heart sometimes, but that's just the way it is.
I couldn't have said any of that better. I like to the analogy between dealing with customers and dealing with coworkers. Like there are people who are just not going to get it, and then there are people who are just saying rude stuff out of ignorance. And I love your point at the beginning of like with the people who you can't change their mind. Like, okay, I can't change your mind. That's you, and not
Yeah.
taking it personally, not letting that be about you. Like I can't change your perception. You've already made it your mind on what you think about me. It's
Yeah.
that's
And then you
important.
just hope that by doing a good job and you being the best you can be, that they'll see it on their own. You shouldn't have to like tell someone like
Right.
I'm this way.
Right.
So I think that's the best way to look at it. And it is hard. Like I say this now because I'm reflecting on it, but in the
Right.
moment I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. And it's hard not to get frustrated, especially
Yeah.
when someone's like telling you you don't know anything or that they know more than you or you shouldn't be there. One person was like, oh, you should go back in the shop where you belong. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I say to that? I mean, that
Right.
comes from something that probably has nothing to do with me, or maybe
Right.
they're just having a bad day. Who knows?
Right.
So, but now I have to go work on their car. But
Right.
so you're like, I'm so angry working on this car, but you can't let that affect it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We have like a double layer of stuff, right? Because it's like the industry has a bad rep. Automotive technicians have a bad rep. People don't like us, generally speaking, right? The consumer, the customers, they think we're all out to get them. Like there's all of that level of stuff. And then as women, there's a whole nother level of things that just complicates it. And it is like it's
Yeah.
hard to remember in the moment, like this isn't about me, this is their own stuff. And a lot of it just comes out of ignorance and lack of knowing and their own fears, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So enduro racing. So car racing, enduro racing, custom car building, master BMW technician. You're kind of doing all of the things. Is there a next for you? Like, what's your next thing that you think, or are you already diving into your next thing and we don't know about it yet?
No, I actually, I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out for myself because, for some people, this job is like their passion in life. And I think that I would like to use my like creative side a little bit more because like you said, it is difficult to be creative when you're working on flat rate because you're like, I would like to solve this problem in this way,
Yeah.
but you can't do it because you're like, oh, I gotta turn hours and take all these shortcuts that it's just not fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of like how I could do that, but that's why I mentioned the liaison between the technician and the engineer because I think that would be satisfying for both sides because then I would still be problem solving, but in a creative way. And then you're not doing like manual labor all the time anymore.
Yeah.
So I just have to think of how I can do that and incorporate that into my life somehow. So I don't know.
On that.
To
There's got to be
brainstorm.
a position for that. I think we need to make a
Probably.
position.
I think I have to go back and get an engineering degree and then there'll be a position for that.
Maybe, although not necessarily,
Yeah.
because it's like engineer speak, mechanic speak. Like everybody has their own language. Like there needs to be like a translator at some point.
I think it's true because, like you said, everyone is in their own box in
Yeah.
the departments. No one. I feel like the communication for all the different aspects of a dealership or even a car brand in general, like a company is kind of lost in
Yeah.
between. It's kind of like, well, we're going to have this design, and they're like, all right, great. And then they just do it, but it could be better. I mean,
Right.
anything could be better, but in more sustainable ways, I think.
And more technician friendly ways. It's like, I'm going to
Yeah.
design this awesome HVAC box and it's going to be amazing. And then I'm going to forget the fact that it has to like be in all of this
The
other
car. Yeah.
stuff. And the people who are designing the dash aren't necessarily talking to the people designing the HVAC box
Every
or whatever it
time
is,
I
right?
think of an evaporator, I'm like, why wouldn't you just make a slot where you can pull it out from
Right?
behind the dash?
Thank you.
Why?
Why? It would be so easy.
They make little, like, now they have little flaps in the HVAC box for the
For the
microfilters.
microphone, yeah, it would be so
Why
easy.
wouldn't you just do that and then you unbolt it and you slide it out like a heater core in an E90?
I know. But then we wouldn't be able to make all that amazing time doing that. I actually love
Yeah.
doing that.
I know that's the thing is, you're making time, but really, I don't know if they want you to make time
I
because they're
know.
not thinking about that.
No, they're
Plus,
totally not thinking about
technicians are totally trying to rip off the system anyways. So
that.
who knows?
Gotta
There
love
just
it.
needs to be somebody that's a go-between
Yeah.
that can make it. I mean, even that's what I don't know if it bothers me, but I think about all the waste and packaging from all the parts that we use and where
Yeah.
that goes, or what they're sending stuff over and what they're making it, because now sometimes they've split modules, like the IHK head unit is different from the module, so it's like, why would you split those up? You could just keep them together, or how harnesses are laid out, or main connectors, things like that, just location wise and serviceability. And I think we should be better at it as an industry,
You do have a little bit of
considering.
the engineer brain. I like it.
Yeah.
No, you're
Maybe,
absolutely
I don't
right.
know.
You're absolutely right. We've become really efficient in so many ways. We're making cars that are more efficient. They are using less fuel, but still creating more, like a ton of power. But where where else are we not being efficient? And I think that's a really
Yeah.
valid point. You do need to find a job in that kind of, you've got the brain for it. Anybody who's watching this, if you know of that kind of job,
Yes.
that
If
kind of
anyone can give
position,
us suggestions, I would love to know.
right? And if there's any manufacturers listening, not that I believe there are, but like this should be a position. This should be an official position within your manufacturer. I
Yeah.
love it. Consulting. It's consulting work.
Ergonomic design consultant is what my mom and I came up with.
I like that. So you
Yeah,
could
it
just
sounds
start
very
your own.
official.
You could start your own thing and sell your services to the manufacturers. Be like, I can show you how to do this better.
I'll just be an independent consultant.
I like it. I like it. All right, stay tuned, world. She's going to be taking over soon. We have used up all of our time. I can't believe it's 6 o'clock or whatever time zone it is for you. It's been an
Oh yeah,
hour.
I wasn't even looking.
I know. It's been awesome. I've had such a blast talking to you. You are truly an awesome woman. This was fantastic. I hope we get to talk more
Thank
again
you
soon.
so much. I really do appreciate you having me on here. It's so great to talk to you and talk about all of these things because I don't have a lot of women to talk to about it. So it's nice to
Well,
hear your opinions.
come out to Phoenix sometime when you have
Okay.
some time off next year. We're still doing the all female build, and it would be really cool. You could hang out with a whole bunch of women doing this sorts of stuff.
Maybe I'll take a bike trip out there and meet you there.
I think you totally should.
I
I
can
think it would be
combine
awesome.
all of the things into one trip.
There you go. There you go. I think that should happen, and I can arrange to hopefully go out where you are at some point. But yeah, it would be great to meet in.
Oh yeah, you can come look at my car and we can
Yeah.
go for a drive in it.
Yes.
And you'll get to drive in the 2002.
Yes. I was
Hopefully
hoping
the
you
door
were going to
panel
get
and the
that.
windows will be working properly.
That's all right. If not, we can have a night in the garage fixing stuff. I dig it.
Yeah. Awesome.
You are phenomenal. Keep being phenomenal. Thank you so much for saying yes and joining me on this and sharing your story with everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you guys, everybody that tuned in. I appreciate that.
Definitely. I will connect with you after this. I will be asking for your address so I can send you one of these awesome little girl gang glasses as a thank you for hanging out with me. And to everybody else who tuned in and watched this, thank you guys so much for tuning in and hanging out, spending part of your Wednesday evening with us. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you come back next week to meet another awesome trades lady. And until then, be good to yourselves, be good to one another, and we will see you later. Have a good
Bye.
night,
Have a good
guys.
night.
Bye.